Good afternoon on the YouTube channel of the Media Center Ukraine, Odessa. And a social survey has been conducted in our city, and our current guests will share the results of this survey. And I'd like to remind you that you can ask your questions online. Just scan the QR code on the screen. Our speaker is Polina Bondarenko, analyst at the Ilko Kucheriv Democratic Initiatives Foundation, Anatoliy Boyko, head of the Odessa regional organization of the Committee of Voters of Ukraine, and Oleksandr Shatkhin, political analyst. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's start with Polina with the questions of the mentioned survey, and then we'll analyze the results. Good afternoon, everyone. And I will start with the methodology following the sociological tradition. The survey was conducted in July this year. We had 708 respondents, and this is enough for the Odessa region to have the representative selection. And our survey was conducted in the framework by the Nauman Foundation support. Let's start from the first block. We just started the attitude of respondents to different social groups and Ukrainians from the western regions, IDPs, Russians, Romas, and Jews. And we can see that this is for the friends, relatives, colleagues. The respondents are ready to accommodate Ukrainians from western regions and IDPs. The second circle, the Ukrainians residing in the Odessa region are ready to accommodate Romas and Jews, and Russians are in the third relation circle. 49% of the respondents said they were not ready to accept Russians here. They don't want Russians to be allowed to Ukraine. But when it comes to the social distance, we cannot say that there is some kind of xenophobia towards Russians. A few words about dynamics, because we conducted this survey in 2021, and we can compare results. And compare it to 2021, the social distance has changed significantly for Russians, and it has been almost unchanged for Romas and Jews. They have become even closer, and to understand why the attitude has changed towards Russians. But anyway, a lot of respondents, around 20%, are still ready to perceive Russians as friends, relatives, and neighbors. And there is one more interesting number. 57% of respondents say that the whole of the Russian people are responsible for the aggression against Ukraine. Now I would like to give floor to our political analyst. Let's start with Oleksandr. We don't see any xenophobia towards Russians. How can you explain this? First of all, Odessa is the city where a lot of families still have relatives in Russia, and they have been residing there for many years. Those people, they preserved good relations with their relatives because we have different families with different political views. And this is natural that there are families that still are in contact with their relatives, and there's no xenophobia. This is the attitude towards Russians, but most Odessa residents say that all Russian society is responsible for the war that Russia started against Ukraine in 2014 and the full-scale invasion that started in 2022. As for the Jews, this is a normal situation because it would be really strange if the attitude to Jews has been changed in Odessa. And Anatoly, I would like to give a floor to Anatoly. I would like to thank the Foundation of Democratic Initiative for their support. You will see a lot of interesting information in our presentation. that there's been a problem in Odessa with quality sociology. That's why we need to try to improve the situation. The conclusions are not surprising to me, and here I fully support Alexander in what he has just explained. But I think that the attitude to Russians should be considered separately. This is not about xenophobia. This is about the attitude to Russians. Do you agree with the question about Russians in this survey? Yes, it's fine. So, on the one hand, a lot of Odessa residents have really a lot of connections with the contacts with their relatives in Russia, and what to do with this? This is a logical question, but this is not about xenophobia, but this is my personal opinion. And I think that we should have some different categories when it comes to xenophobia, because we cannot imagine any xenophobia towards Jews, because this is the key ethnic group in Odessa, and there is a huge part of history related to them. You've mentioned 708 respondents. What is the average age of your respondents? And what was the method of survey that was face-to-face survey? You can get more details in our press release about the methodology. As for the average age, I can find it in our press release, but it is representative of the demographic structure of the population as of 2022. And as for the format, face-to-face survey, when it's by phone, the results can be different because when it's by phone, people can be more honest, more objective compared to face-to-face. But this is not about ratings of the president or of mayor. We're discussing the feelings of the people, and I think that if there are some errors, they are insignificant. And we are all now in a stressed, unstable condition, and our state can change several times during the day. But this error, if it's there, it is not clear. We should compare the data in the morning and in the evening. That's thanks God we at least have a possibility to have a survey. And just I would like to respond quickly. And the phone survey can have different results, but the error is okay. But when it comes to phone, there are disadvantages. The biggest share of respondents who refuse to finalize the survey. The next part is about trust. So we are now going to the political environment from the social one. And here we wanted to understand the attitude of people to the armed forces of Ukraine, volunteer organizations, the president of Ukraine, heads of local authorities, heads of regional administration, and these territorial recruitment centers. You can see results on the graph. The first place, the armed forces of Ukraine, followed by volunteers, then the president of Ukraine, when it comes about the balance, trust, and mistrust. And the lowest score, the lowest level, is to the heads of the region of the state and military administrations, and also the territorial recruitment centers. And this is representative of the national trend. And on the next slide, we can see more detailed information about a percentage. Do you want to respond to that? And when it comes to the heads of local councils and the territorial recruitment centers, for the last, there are no questions. And as for the authorities, I can say that. And this is really in line with my personal perception. on the one hand, and on the other hand, now the president has the biggest trust when it even comes to psychological aspect. He successfully represents the social role of the leader during the war. And on the other hand, we always try to find some guidance, and we trust that person, especially during some danger, if that's an adequate personality. And this is a traditional role of the president, and this is then the lowest level of trust is the cabinet of ministers and the Verkhovna Rada. Verkhovna Rada is our classic scapegoat, even if it's not true. As for the local administrations, from the point of view of the society, usually trusts less the colleague parties. And people believe that local administrations are less useful. So we are more inclined in mistrusting authorities. And in this situation, what is closest to us seems to us more guilty. And what was it a general question, or did you name a last name of the person? Maybe it is a negative attitude to the job. I think that now the situation is the following, is that every city understands that Ukraine has been facing the national disaster, and people will support the president more. And here is one remark. I remember the social survey at the beginning of April 2022, and 92 or 94% of people supported the president in Odessa. The number is significantly less now, but still it is a significant number for Ukrainian people. And we know that Ukrainian people are inclined to, so to say, fall in love quickly and then quickly start mistrusting people. But still the number is quite high. And people do not understand what is done by military administrations. There are a lot of corruption scandals. There are a lot of procurement procedures which are unclear to people. And everything is combined now. And we can also see the political struggle, which was not that active last year. And some of the election processes have already started. And nowadays, people don't understand the responsibility of military administrations. As for the recruitment centers, this is a disaster because mobilization processes are scandalous, and no other city supports that. As for Zelensky, you say that at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the support was 92% in Odessa, and before the full-scale invasion, do you know the numbers? I don't remember the exact numbers, but we remember that the level of support was gradually declining. But then after the full-scale invasion, the level of the support increased, so people were inclined to find a person to trust. And back then, that was the president, who had a very clear pro-Ukrainian position, and people just supported him. But nowadays, the president is responsible for a whole range of the scandalous decisions, and their borders are closed. And another social survey shows that people believe that the president is responsible for all corruption scandals over the last year. What position could you add to this rating? I think that Zaluzhny could be added there. And I can say that it would be interesting to make comparison from the professional point of view. Will it have the will it here have the personal level of trust higher than the collective level of trust to the armed forces of Ukraine. But for me personally, Zaluzhny and the armed forces of Ukraine are the most prominent figures. But this is just from the professional point of view. We can compare that. But I don't think that there would be a big difference. Just a few words about the president. The president is elected, the head of the city or like village is elected, but the head of administration of the regional administration is appointed. When it comes to mayor, when it comes to president, they always have some pool of their voters that will trust them anyway, but this is not the case for the heads of administrations. That's why the level of support is always less. They are more perceived as foreign figures. And what could we personalize more? For example, Trukhanov or Kieper could be added here. This is again the question to the methodology. Perhaps it would give us additional information about that personalities, but actually it would not be representative of the perception of the institutions. And it would be more difficult to add Trukhanov here because we had a survey all over the region, and people from other areas of the region cannot answer the question about Trukhanov. They would say that it was difficult for them to answer, and we would not have representative numbers with regard to that question. Let's continue. Our next section was dedicated to support of Ukrainization and de-Russification. And in Odessa region, the situation is different from other regions of Ukraine, and not always to the best. We had several questions here. First of all, what language do you mostly speak at home now? You can see that in 2023, 42% say that they use Ukrainian, and this is a significant increase compared to 2021, when that number amounted to 26%. So most people still speak Russian, but anyway, we see a significant increase over the last 2 years. We also asked about the violation of language rights of Ukrainian-speaking and Russian-speaking citizens. 49% say that the rights of the Ukrainian speakers are not violated. 35 say that violated. As for Russian-speaking persons, numbers are the same. 42% say that the rights are violated. 42% say that their rights are not violated. And those people who answered saying that yes, there are violations, and around 30% say that this is a systematic problem. As for Ukrainian speakers, only 4% see it as a systematic issue. The next question was about the attitude to learning Ukrainian. I have a question to experts about the language. Don't you think that we should be careful about raising language issues? There is a thin line, and usually it can lead to some negative consequences, and maybe we should avoid such questions at the moment. I do not agree with you. I think that this issue should be always discussed. We have not been discussing it for 30 years, and you can see the result. As for the numbers, these are quite significant numbers for the Odessa region. We know that what is the population of Odessa, and we know that many people before used mostly Russian language, and 42% of people using Ukrainian is quite a significant number. This is important because what the language that we use at home defines the attitude to the language, because the language can be developed starting from families. And I would like to say that these 42% show the significant change of the city of Odessa and the Odessa region, because the Odessa region is quite a difficult region, and where a lot of different ethnic groups of population reside. When it comes to the south of Odessa region, a lot of people, they don't speak not only Ukrainian, but they don't speak Russian at home. They speak Bulgarian, Romanian, and not Ukrainian or Russian languages. The situation has been changing, and this is a very promising indicator and numbers. And when I say that we should not raise the issue of the language question when there are some scandals about using Russian language, it is used at once by the Russian propaganda. The Russian propaganda successfully uses everything, even those things that are non-existent. This is their style. That's why we can never guess what they are going to use. And here I can fully support Oleksandr. And I can also add that for me personally, the progress is most valuable. I would like to warn ourselves and other people from saying about the scale of the progress, that this is not enough or it is rather small. It is important that we still have the progress. And I would like to add here that the language is a part of culture, but culture is not only the language. In some district centers, we don't have churches or cathedrals of the Ukrainian diocese. And we are talking here about the level of cultural infrastructure, and it also affects the level of language use. If in some place there have never been any systematic efforts to promote the development of the Ukrainian language, and there is a polyethnic group, and then it means that what we have there, the natural progress, because the mindset of people is changing, and they make their personal choice to speak Ukrainian, then any progress is of great value. And we just need to support this progress at all levels and also to create the infrastructure needed. Before the war in Bessarabia, the broadcast was more from Transnistria and from Russia and not from the territory of Ukraine. And of course, that could not but have its impact. I also think that when respondents asked the question about the violation of their rights, I would like to get details of that. You know, when around 15 years ago, the office of the language ombudsman was opened, everyone called saying that just neighbors insult them. But that was not related to the Declaration of Human Rights, and technically that was not the violation of human rights. And I think that this could be also the case here, because answering the question, they could also talk about the household bullying. This is a mindset question. And you see, we did not ask about the personal experience of people. We asked them about their perception. I'm not talking about the errors in this survey, but I think that that is not such a big problem with violation of people's rights. So we should divide this by two, not by two. But of course, there are some issues because of the changes, and the changes imply conflicts. But this is not about some systematic, targeted violation of someone's rights. These are the conflicts during changes. Thank you, and we'll continue. And when it comes to infrastructure, The young people, 18, 29, they used Ukrainian language more at home compared to elderly people, to pensioners. But we can see that around 66% of respondents say that Russian writers should be studied at school. And we can see some grade here. So some of them believe, 32%, that the classic materials should be preserved. Others believe that we should continue learning a work of Russian writers. Some believe that we should exclude those who did not support Ukraine, and about around 65% stand for continuation of learning, studying work of Russian writers, compared to 24 who are against. I think that the percentage will change, but everything which is related to Russian classical literature will remain. And we will learn and study that because there is a huge example, the state of Israel, where for 15 years nobody just studied German classic literature at schools and universities. But time passed and they started studying German literature. And I think that it's about a personal attitude of whether to read or not to read. But Russian literature is represented in all countries. We're just offended. We don't want to have anything from Russia, but it will preserve in our life. And I think that Odessa residents just have a forecast of the future. There is a world literature. And Russian authors can be preserved, of course, if they were not against Ukraine, if they didn't have Ukrainian phobia. And they could be in the same promotion as American, British, French authors for people to have proper level of education. And as a father of 6 grade boy, we have some problems with literature because our schools are not interested in making children interested in literature. But the school curriculum is still just oriented on some huge volumes of something technically read. And it is very difficult for children to read that. Yes, but this is a different topic. But everything is interrelated. And could be as the part of the world literature, and we should exclude those authors who had Ukrainian phobia. And we should have healthy proportion. Before that, the Russian literature had a huge share of what we started, because our children should also study not only Ukrainian, Russian, or also French, American, British authors, and we should just change the format, taken into consideration of how heavily Russian narratives were promoted on our territory. Let's come back to the top of the Russian language in the public environment. It's very positive. 59% of respondents are positive about obligatory use of the Ukrainian language into service provision. And 37%, which is less, support. 37% of respondents are not against of having Russian songs in the public environment. so they are against the ban of Russian artists. But perhaps I believe that this just related to the fact that these are quite fresh legislative initiatives. And it also depends on the age of respondents. And so that obligatory use of Ukrainian language in the service area was introduced several years ago. But banned artists from Russia is something new. Maybe the society has not been adjusted to that. I would like to comment upon a very important thing. Everything which is related to the obligation of speaking Ukrainian language, no one regulates that. In most supermarkets, they can address you like any language, even if you address them in Ukrainian. When there is no state control over legislation, there is chaos. And the same is related to Russian songs. And we can see that in different regions of Ukraine, in those videos on social media, you can find a lot of Russian music. It is everywhere. The same in Odessa, in Arcadia. So if the state fails to control its own laws, the laws will be never kept. And we have the right to be addressed Ukrainian if we address in Ukrainian. And we should not ask about this. It should be clear, because when you come to any other country, like Poland, no one talks to you German. And in Italy, no one addresses you in French. So this should be by default. At the moment, I believe that in this area, the state just fails to control all its laws. And as for the Russian songs performed by Ukrainian artists, most people cannot be against just using the language the person wants for his or her songs. But when we have too many of the songs, as we can see in many Ukrainian cities, it surprises because it is really strange to sing songs of Russian singers who support dictator and in his killing of Ukrainians. I can just add that all these are logical steps. We just need time for it to become something normal, but we are just going to the proper direction. We still have like 6-7 minutes, so we need to hurry up. So let's get to the next section, and our audience will be able to find the results of this survey in our press release. Misinformation, and now we are at the media center, and this is a very important question. We see that most respondents, when we ask them about the sources of media they use to learn about the war, named different Telegram channels. And for example, Truha Telegram channel has the most coverage all over Ukraine, but in our case, only 10 respondents named that Telegram channel. Then it is followed by national channels, and respondents just in rare cases mentioned Odessa media. Mobilization, we have already mentioned it today, and we can see that 90% of respondents said yes to the question, have you heard from your friends or acquaintances about cases of summonses being handed out in public places? And when it comes about this knowledge, this affects the trust into 3 military institutions that have already been mentioned today. For example, It affects the level of trust to the head of the regional military administration, and those people who know about the cases of summons being handed in public places just trust less to the head of military administration and recruitment officers, centers, but it has not affected the trust to the armed forces of Ukraine. Let's go on. And here we have some warning numbers here. We see that 39% of respondents have friends who take measures for them not to receive summons in public places. So people just stay home, or they try to avoid some public areas or parks, or monitor Telegram channels to avoid some places. 69% of respondents say that they believe that handing summons in public places is unjustified and violates human rights. 11% do not agree with that. They say that this is explained by the war, justified by the war. I can get to the next question, but perhaps you have some comments about mobilization. Let's get to the next point. Here we assessed as respondents percept the current situation in the war and how they see the ending of the war. 45% of respondents say that they can agree for the continuation of the war if it is needed for the victory. There are 37% that want the war to end soon at any cost. But really, it is not 37%. If we look at some people who are ready just to do something, this is one number, but if people were asked about if they're ready to give territories, then they are not ready. 33% say that they do not agree that if war continues, we will get less support from the West. This is also about the perception of the continuation of the war. If they believe that the West will continue supporting Ukraine, then they are ready to continue the war despite of the inconveniences. We can also see some interesting trend here that 48% say that we have seen significant losses and that we need to make some concessions to agree, but 33% say that we have faced such significant losses that we cannot step back and we need to continue this war. And for me, this is the most important slide about the readiness to make compromises. People can agree to some of the compromises, and only 7% agree to all compromises. And we can see also here the balance between the acceptance of some concessions. All respondents have the negative balance of acceptance. Unacceptable is the alternative to decrease the number of the soldiers in the armed forces of Ukraine, or recognition of the part of Ukraine as part of Russia. People not ready to accept this. People can agree for Ukraine not to join the NATO, and the share of respondents is quite big in here, of those who cannot answer the question. Such alternatives as refusal from the policy of decolonization, or the status of the Russian language as the state language is unacceptable for most respondents. And we just are running out of time. Just very briefly, Oleksandr. Here, I would like to add the level of the support of NATO session in Odessa. And what we can see here, this is refusal to decrease the number of the military in Ukraine, because everyone understands that the safety and security of Ukraine depends on the armed forces of Ukraine. I think that several years ago that numbers were not that high. And this shows that Ukrainians, including Odessa residents, have trust in the armed forces of Ukraine, and that the armed forces of Ukraine will help Ukrainians to preserve their nation state and our borders and territories as recognized by the international communities. There is still 1 minute left. You've asked about what can be added to the list of trust. It would be interesting to add NATO there, because it looks that people trust more the armed forces of Ukraine than NATO. But this is the specifics of Odessa. Odessa residents support the armed forces of Ukraine more and than any international entities. And to have such a survey abroad, I think that the trust in the armed forces of Ukraine would have also been higher than the trust into the NATO. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for these results. We are waiting for other surveys. Our next briefing will be at 1 p.m.